Hello, everyone. This is Tommy at World at War Comics. Thanks for joining us today. But before we get started, hit that subscribe button, hit that ring bell. That really helps out the channel. Before we get into our next guest, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for following us. Thank you for participating in our channel. We really work hard in order to bring some of the best guests possible onto our YouTube channel, Spotify and Apple. And we just want to thank you. Without you, obviously, there is no channel. So I'm hoping and wishing all of you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'm actually in Utah right now with my family and visiting my daughter and her husband, my son-in-law. And then all my other children have come in. So it's great to be together. I hope that all of you and your family is together as well. All right. Our next guest is Mr. Tyler James. He is the owner of Comix Tribe that have brought amazing titles like Epic. He also, off the success of all of the Kickstarters that they've had under Comix Tribe, he is an expert when it comes to Kickstarter crowdfunding. He actually has the #1 comic book crowdfunding podcast in the world, and you should check it out. It is called Comix Launch. And it is awesome. Gives you amazing interviews with other Kickstarter comic book creators, artists, and writers, and also gives a lot of really good feedback on how to be successful when it comes to crowdfunding. All right, without further ado, here is our next guest, Mr. Tyler James. I hope you enjoy.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. Today, I have another amazing guest. Today, I have Mr. Tyler James. He is the publisher of Comix Tribe, and he's also the host of Comix Launch. And obviously, you've written some comics. You have a lot of a great experience, Tyler. Really glad to have you on the show to kind of walk through some of that experience. I know you've been a help to a lot of people, so maybe we could talk about that as well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. All right. This is, we're coming up on the holidays. This is sort of like the last sort of full work week before I take a little bit of a break into the new year. So just trying to finish the year strong.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you and your family have some pretty cool plans, and it's always kind of fun. It's a weird time that it's kind of landing on, right? Isn't it? Is it Monday or what? Sunday? Something like that.
Yeah. It's a little different, but I have a 5-year-old who has been counting it down since I don't know since Halloween probably. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
we're in that season where it's still kind of magical. So I'm excited about it.
that's awesome. All my kids are over 18, so those days are gone, but I certainly miss them, man. Nothing more special than having someone young that's super excited about that. It makes you excited about it, right?
Really does. It really does.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you, inviting me on the show. And I love talking comics, everything from the making of them to how you actually build an audience for them and do this in a sustainable way. And so, I've definitely, as I have done what I've done as a creator, one of the things that I've just always been passionate about is like when I learn something, I got to share it. when I do something, I sort of my background and my sort of passion and heart is that of a teacher. So, for the last 8 years or so, I've really combined my love of comics with also my, desire to sort of teach and share what really works to build audiences and launch awesome comic projects to them, harnessing tools like crowdfunding and the Kickstarter platform in particular. But so much more than that. There's so much that goes into just getting books out into the world, and so I just love working with creators to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, Tyler. I think nothing's more scarier than jumping into your first Kickstarter and you're like halfway through and you're not sure if you're going to make it. It's such an amazing platform, but it also, I feel like, creates so much stress in your life if you don't know what you're doing, which a lot of times I don't know what I'm doing personally. I think it's so amazing that you're out there to help. But maybe before we kind of get into that, Tyler, maybe we could kind of take a step back. Man, I would love to kind of understand your passion around comics. That would be awesome, man. When was your first comic that you picked up? You remember that?
I mean, I think comics were sort of always there in my life, having uncles, having other people, and that was one of the things that was big for me was, I was always surrounded by superheroes, Batman, Superman, etc.
Yeah.
To the point where, when I was my cousin's age, I would come back from school with a backpack full of Batman utility belts that I had made at home, or like little masks and things like that. And my mom did tell me that she was concerned what I would do when I discovered that I could not actually become a superhero when I grew up. And I guess eventually she learned, well, you might not be able to become a superhero, but you can write books about them, and I have, and so that was fun. But when I think about the light switch moment for me was, I read the comics, read the Superman, read the Spider-Man, but back in the day, pre-internet as we know it today, pre everything that's ever been created lives digitally, I recognized that there was like this, frustration that no matter what, I would never be able to read all of Spider-Man or all of Superman or all of anything because I didn't have an extra, $500,000 sitting around to go grab issue number 1. And even back then, graphic novels, trade collections weren't really a thing like they are today. And so that was always a little bit of a frustration with me. And that was also why I was so excited about like the image creation, where the idea of like, these creators that are some of the top guys from Marvel and DC just branching off, starting their own universe from scratch that I could jump in and get involved with from the very beginning. And like, I didn't have to go back into the archive. I could just go to my comic shop and get caught up. And so I was and I was like probably 13, 14 at that time. So it was like the perfect time. And so that got me into it. And then I quickly found it's like, oh, like it dawned on me it's somewhere in there as I'm like reading the names of the creators behind it, and they would do little features in the back of some of those early image books about the creators. And these are like people that weren't that much older. A lot of them weren't that much older than me.
Yeah.
And it sort of dawned on me that, oh, wait a minute, like these characters, they aren't something that just always existed. They were created. And, and that was something that like, I think, kind of like Mickey Mouse, like Spider-Man, Superman, like they've existed as long as we've been around, as long as we've been alive. They're just like like the Grand Canyon or the Statue of Liberty, right?
Right.
Like they just existed in the world, and you sort of lose track that, oh, there's actually creators that are behind this thing. And I think what happens with a lot of comic fans at some point is like you read enough of them, you're like, hey, I want to make some of these myself. And I started paying more attention to the creators' names than the characters' names in some regards. And so when I was I probably started drawing comics pretty regularly when I was 12, and started like making actual completed books 13, 14, and doing printing them up at my dad's or my stepdad's office, just maxing out his Xerox machine, using up all his copy paper to print these books of my own. But I loved it. And so that was really my sort of comics origin story.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And then as far as actually publishing your first comic, when did that take place?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a world right now where like, what do we even consider your first published work, right? Like,
good point. Yeah.
The first comic that I ever sold, I sold 9 copies for $1 a piece out of my backpack in high school. But you know what? Like, like the elation of having people buy that was probably on par with that first Kickstarter that did $26,000. Right? It's it's all relative at all scales. But I made a lot of comics when I was in high school, but didn't really publish them beyond just printing up a few copies and everything like that. Still weren't really in the world of like print on demand. Wasn't really there. I remember like, and also like there weren't the resources out there that were today. You know, I had one book on comics, which was the Stan Lee,
Yeah.
John Buscema book that,
Yeah, I think I have it
you
over
know,
somewhere.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you have, I'm sure, I mean, it's still a great place to
Yeah.
start,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
thing hadn't been updated in, 25 years when I got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, so there's a lot of stuff I didn't know. So like, there was one comic that I drew like my whole senior year of college or senior year of high school
Uh-huh.
that I did on like this massive Bristol board. Like I heard
Yeah.
people use Bristol board,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, they got this, but why not go with the big one? It was like this, it was like, I don't know, 14 by 17,
Yeah.
like much, like a lot bigger than what most comic boards are, and such that like to even get it shrunk down to print and to be able to print it, like my dad had to find like a specialty printer that would do it, and spend a lot of money like just reducing the thing because
Yeah.
just didn't know,
Yeah.
right? And so then I took a bit, there was sort of a big gap where I went to college, and then had a tough job after teaching in an under-resourced inner city school
Yeah.
for a couple of years afterwards, and so there was kind of like very little time for me to do comics. But by my mid-20s, like I just recognized that there was like this really creative void in my life. But I was also found myself like at my office job, like occasionally jumping in on comic creator message boards, and
Yeah.
and realizing, oh man, a lot has changed in this in the industry, and there's a lot of resources out there, and I slowly just, I took a class on comic book script writing, which sort of changed how I approached just the
Mhm.
creation side of things, but got me really just back into creating pretty regularly.
Right.
And then I jumped into a project that was just kind of me on my own, doing everything: the writing, the drawing, the inking, the
Mhm.
lettering, the coloring, from and um, and then ended up printing that, just doing a print on demand thing,
Yeah.
publishing it under Tyler James Comics because I had nothing, no other name to do it. So I might as well use my own,
Yeah.
and started going to conventions and having the blast and the adrenaline rush, much like it was when I was, 9. You're selling my comics at 12 years old or 14 years old,
Yeah.
um, where people are buying your comics and checking out original artwork or asking you for sketches,
Yeah.
and so yeah, so that kind of got me into it.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of like projects that did okay, but I also sort of recognized, by doing every single thing myself,
Yeah.
I can only put out maybe a book a year,
Yeah.
and also my book would only be as good as the thing that I was worst at. And so, like you're only as good as your weakest link idea. And I sort of had a little moment of like, what are my goals here? What do I want to do? And it's like, I don't want to just put out one book a year. I don't want to just work in one genre. I like, there are other stories that I want to tell, and I'm probably not the best artist for most of the stories that I want to tell.
Right.
And I sort of had the, enough of a drive or just competitive edge. It's like, hey man, I don't really just want to compete in the indie artist alley section of my local convention. Like I want books on every shelf in the nation
Yeah. Yeah.
at this time, and I want to compete with the comics that everybody's reading and celebrating and loving. And I sort of realized, well, to do that, I'm probably going to have to work with build teams, work with creators, artists that are better than me, work with colorists that are top notch, get color cover artists that can do more.
Right.
And so that was sort of like what led to the creation of Comix Tribe, my publishing imprint, and ultimately working with a lot more creators and sliding, taking kind of a little bit of a step back from primarily being a
Mhm.
creative writer and more of a publisher and
Yeah.
imprint focused. Um, And so, Comix Tribe was born in 2011. And we, and one of the things that we decided to do, my co-founder and editor-in-chief, Stephen Forbes, we sort of decided that, hey, let's document the journey of starting a new comic book company from scratch, and what are we going to learn, and we'll use like the Comix Tribe website and the blog as a resource for creators that to sort of learn from us. And so when we started it, we had no distribution. We had a couple of books in the works, couple of projects in the works, nothing. But fast forward, just a few years, and we had distribution with Diamond. We started having a lot of success on Kickstarter, and had just learned a ton. And some of our books were winning awards and getting, rave reviews. And we were working with really cool creators and giving the first paid work to many creators that have gone on to have really great careers. And so it's been a hell of a journey.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, when did you, so you're going through this process with Steven, you're coming up with these processes or step-by-step of how to be successful, especially on the crowdfunding. And then all of a sudden crowdfunding explodes. Can you kind of walk us through where you found some of these like missing links for most creators when it comes to crowdfunding? Because I think there's a lot of questions around there. It does seem to be like an Instagram algorithm type thing where like, how do I get successful, and how come some creators are just blowing it up, and then other ones who maybe in your mind think have even a better product can't even scratch the surface of what crowdfunding can provide for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first became aware of Kickstarter, I was as skeptical as probably anybody. It's like, why would this work? It's like, we're having trouble selling these books that we already printed 50 copies of. Why,
Exactly.
why would it work that this book that it isn't even done, doesn't even exist yet, people are going to give you money? Like, it was baffling to me at first. And I was kind of able to dismiss it a little bit, because when I first was aware of it, I had some friends that launched projects, or had some projects that like, that looks like a worthy project. But, the first 4 projects I backed all kind of failed miserably. And most projects didn't succeed. But eventually, there were a couple projects that just really seemed to lock into something and take off. And I sort of saw the potential of what it could be if you run a really good campaign. There wasn't a lot of resources out there for what a really good campaign looked like, but there were a couple, and there were a couple of examples. And I just really saw the writing on the wall that, hey, if you could build excitement around a product like this, has more of a chance to succeed than a lot of the other things. I don't know if you were paying attention to the scene around the time, which was, sort of predated Kickstarter a little bit, but when DC launched a initiative called Zuda Comics, which was their they basically launched an initiative to support digital comics. It was sort of like their web comics play. But the thing that was interesting about it is that every month they held an online contest where I believe 10 comics competed. And every one of those comics in the competition got a check for like $500 for all of 8 pages of so like an 8-page pitch. And then one of those would be rewarded based on voting with a contract that was worth like $26,000 or something like that to make like a season's worth of content. And that, like, for all its challenges, all its problems, and the fact that it didn't ultimately last or work, what that initiative with real money behind it injected so much just life into the indie comic creator community, where all of a sudden a lot of those message boards that I've been hanging out with are like, hey, let's do this. Let's compete. We'll put together a team.
Yeah.
And, for a lot of creators, like, it's hard to invest in pitches or in things when there's like when there's no chance of recouping your funding or your money. That became really difficult. But this became like this one little chance that, hey, there's a chance, there's a pretty good chance you'll make the initial competition, and there's $500, which you can pay an artist a little bit a month. Like, it's a little something, right? And so anyway, but if you got into that competition, I think I was in 2 or 3 of them. And I, got checks from DC Comics and got on their mailing list, which for Christmas cards, which was, as a relatively young creator, like, that was just like a boost of confidence. Like, I was able to get a pro badge at New York Comic Con based on that. I'm like, yeah, man, like, I'm in this world now. But more so than that, it was like everything that went into, all right, you're in this contest, but now it's up to you to get people to check it out, get people to go vote, promote, like, do social media, learn a little bit about paid traffic and running ads to your thing so that you could get more eyeballs on it. And there was like gamesmanship and everything. And so, like, when I was involved in those contests, it gave me a little bit of a crash course on like comic book marketing, understanding that there's a return on the other end. Unfortunately, the Zuda thing, like, there was only really one grand prize winner, and a lot of that, that effort would go to some projects that wouldn't ultimately go anywhere. But I sort of was primed and ready based on that experience to then apply that same stuff to Kickstarter. And what's great about Kickstarter is there can be a lot more winners, right? Like, everybody's sort of running their own campaign based on their own goals and everything like that. And so I did feel like I had a little bit of a leg up just because I had started contextualizing and learning the value of an email list and audience engagement and having an online presence and treating a launch like a campaign, as opposed to, hey, I got this thing on sale. Buy it if you like it, or if you don't, like, we see a lot of humble or overly humble, creators take that approach when they're doing their marketing. And unfortunately, unless your work is so overwhelmingly, breathtakingly, unabashedly, undeniably amazing, it won't sell itself.
That's a lot for the consumer to have to learn on their own too, which doesn't happen in any business usually.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so anyway, I applied everything that I learned from Zuda, and then everything that I had been researched from campaigns that I thought did it particularly well, and the very few amount of resources that were written specifically about launching comic book Kickstarter projects. And I applied those to my very first launch, and that first launch, had 450 backers and raised $26,000, which, if you had combined like all of my comic sales and efforts since I'd started making them in, at age 14, it, vastly outweighed with just that one launch and just those 30 days, like everything that I had done previously collectively, from conventions to trying to sell to local comic shops, doing consignment, all these other crazy stuff. And so for the first time ever, like, I had capital in my comics business to work with, and a decent size audience base, 30% of which was international, that were just like 30 to 40% discovered us on Kickstarter.
Wow.
And so that was just like this massive injection of not just confidence and oh yes, we can do this, but also capital. And when you're running a business, like money, like tangible money in a bank account, like, that's the lifeblood that makes the whole thing run. And so that was, and we were able to sort of parlay that into, okay, well, hey, now we can invest in bigger print runs so that we can actually reach out to a diamond and get in the diamond catalog, and we can use this as a proof point that we have an audience and get accepted there, and we have some other series that we can sort of invest in, and it really just helped things take off from there. But one of the misconceptions that I had even going into that first successful launch is, and one of the reasons why I probably delayed maybe a year longer than I actually needed to actually launch that first Kickstarter project, was that I had the idea back then that, well, this crowdfunding thing, it's probably like it's a Kickstarter, but you only start at the beginning.
Yeah.
So you get like one crack at this.
Yeah.
So you better make it count. And so I no, not this project, not this project, not this project. I want to do a project that would maximize it. And so my first launch was for an anthology project around a popular character that we had sort of, that sort of had a, just a visceral appeal that we proved at conventions, and just people like, I saw, tell me about this guy, right? It was one of those things. It's like, all right, we'll do an anthology project about this character, which was oxymoron, a serial killer obsessed with contradiction. He was a minor character in sort of like a red herring character a little bit in my series, The Red 10, but just had a lot of appeal. So built an anthology, knowing that, well, I'm like, all right, I do have a little bit of an audience that I picked up over the years, but if I can tap into the power of all of the other creators' audiences, maybe that'll give this thing a good chance of getting funded.
Yeah.
But I didn't know then what I know now, that if you do a great launch, if you treat your backers well, if you under promise, over deliver, if you make a great product, they're going to be asking you, hey, let's run this back. When are you going to come back? What's the next thing that I can support? And to fast forward today, where there's a big chunk of the comic buying audience that does the majority of their support of the industry on crowdfunding campaigns. They're not going to the comic shops every single week. They're not necessarily getting to conventions every year. Kickstarter is kind of how they interact with the industry, and so and how they consume their comics. And so the fact that it is a renewable resource if you use it correctly, I figured that out pretty early, but probably not early, like as early as I wish I had.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So yeah, so we kept launching, and as people were asking for more, and we did a few more launches. And I think by like my fifth launch, I'm like, wait a minute, I kind of feel like I start from scratch on these projects every single time. Let me systematize this a little bit. So I started doing things like coming up with a project folder template and some checklists and some cheat sheets and things, so that I wasn't, for myself, recreating the wheel every time. I was making things easier. And around that same time, I also was noticing that on the Comix Tribe blog that I had written, and that Kickstarter related content was the things that people were reading the most on the site. It was also the things that when I would do conventions and people would come up to me, they would, mention, oh, hey, I want to talk to you about crowdfunding. You seem to have figured this a thing or two out about it. And so at that same time, we were having some more traction. Like I was still mostly focused on the direct market, and because I worked with a lot of creators that have aspirations for writing with the writing for the big two and doing other things. So being relevant in on your local comic shelves was important to a lot of the creators that I work with, and so a lot of the focus was in the direct market, even while we were doing, one or two Kickstarters a year. Mm-hmm. And so there was a disconnect that was happening between like the critical acclaim of some of the books that we were putting out and what they were selling in the direct market. And I'm like, man, well, that falls on me, the publisher. Like I'm getting great. I should be graded on the sales. And so I really did a deep dive into the marketing to just like, all right, I know some stuff. I'm pretty good at a few things, but how do I get even better at this stuff? And so like, I just found myself going down like a fun rabbit hole of the world of marketing and looking outside of comics for inspiration or things or techniques that I could implement myself to increase our sales and improve our sales everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was consuming a lot of podcasts, reading a lot of audiobooks, and much like you read enough comics, you want to start making comics, you listen to enough podcasts, you're like, why don't I have a podcast? And these articles that I've been writing that every time I publish them, I then go back and have to re-update it 15 times because I found typos.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot less, wouldn't it be a lot more fun to just talk into a microphone?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure, yeah.
And so when I decided to do the Comix Launch podcast, at this time, I was also learning about the power of niching down and focusing, and in order to connect, like you would rather be, there can only be a few like Joe Rogans or whatever that are out there. Just we're talking about whatever and have whatever guests and use the power of our celebrity. Like that was never going to be me. But what I could do, because it didn't exist, was create the #1 comic book crowdfunding podcast on the planet. Right? Yeah. Didn't exist. Might as well make it. And then and so. So that's what I did. I really niched down to comics crowdfunding, mindset, strategies, tactics. And that was the Comix Launch podcast that started in 2015. When I started it, I'm like, you know what, I'll commit to doing half a year's worth of episodes. I'll commit to doing 20. No, actually, I think I started with 12, and then I went to 24. And then after doing 24 consecutive weeks, I'm like, why would I ever stop? Yeah. and I haven't stopped since.
I'm on a roll. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really a, there's a, for doctors, when they try to learn a new procedure, it's like watch one, do one, teach one. Right. And I've often been a proponent that like you haven't truly mastered something until you can teach it to someone else and they can get good results with it. Yeah. And so part of doing the Comix Launch podcast was like, hey, this is going to force me to get better at this. It might also force me to do some things that I wouldn't normally just do, like actually let me do some original quantitative or qualitative research. And let me crunch numbers on the Kickstarter platform and what actually works versus just analytics. And so let me do some surveys of creators and actually like hone in on what the real struggles and challenges are. And so I've really been in that world since 2015, doing that while at the same time continually using crowdfunding to build my publishing business. And it is still a major component of our annual sales and what we've been able to just achieve on the publishing side. And that includes the comics and graphic novels that we've continued to put out. And then I also, much to my surprise, but something I'm really grateful that I got involved with because it's been, incredibly successful and lucrative, is we started a children's book and toy brand called C is for Cthulhu that we publish under the Comix Tribe imprint as well. That has just, it's the #2 all-time most successful children's book brand on the Kickstarter platform.
That's great.
We've sold I think we're up to 14,000 copies of the original board book, and it's been translated into 3 foreign languages. We've got the 10th anniversary remastered edition is coming out next year, along with and we've got like a line of plush toys and all kinds of cool stuff related to that. And never would have thought I would be in the children's book space when I got into this, but now that I have a 5-year-old, and he's been sort of our model for the
Yeah.
last 5 years of just putting him next to our products. It's worked out really good. It's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. Well, I mean, you have like this explosion of crowdfunding that has taken place of different sites, right? So you have Kickstarter, which I think is still the most well-known. You have Indiegogo, which I think is another great platform. But now you got Crowdfunder, you have Fund My Comic, you have Zoop. Like, and like a lot of things, when they start to hit a peak of popularity and a lot of people start to get into it, right? You have all these options, and then eventually it'll come down and it'll plateau somewhere. And that's normal in any business, right?
Yeah.
When you look at all these crowdfunding sites, do you think we're still at the beginning? You think there's still going to be more that pop up, or do you think we're starting to come back down and it will plateau somewhere? Will you have like 3 that are really strong and the other ones will kind of die off eventually?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It did feel like for a minute that every couple of months there was a new platform launching.
Yeah.
And now, like, I would say it would probably be a tough business to get in right now if you were trying to start a brand new one. Because it's similar to what we are we're already talking about, of like, broad versus niching down. Like, the ones that I think have a chance are the ones that are specifically doing things different. Kickstarter is by far, the last time I checked, it was still, 5x its nearest competitor in terms of the traffic volume that it gets and the funding that is raised on that platform. In terms of crowdfunding for creative projects. Now, I do know GoFundMe is huge, and there's a bunch of charity crowdfunding sites that are very, very big. I think what Zoop is doing is pretty interesting because while they do have sort of a closer to Kickstarter open model, you run it. I think one of their most important value propositions is that there are a lot of creators out there and artists who they're just like, man, I would love to launch this thing. I know crowdfunding is probably the only way that I can make the book the way I want it, and have control over the end product, and add the fancy bells and whistles and everything, and maximize what the project can make. But I don't want to do all of the steps and all of the things that go into crowdfunding. And so the Zoop model of, hey, we'll run and we'll take care of the fulfillment, and we'll take more, we're going to take a big chunk more than what any of the other platforms are going to take, but we're also going to do a lot more.
Yeah.
I do think that is a nice differentiator for them, and I'm glad they exist. I think BackerKit, I thought BackerKit, of all of the platforms, would be in the best position to take a big chunk out of Kickstarter's, just out of the Kickstarter pie, because they already have established working relationships with the biggest Kickstarter project creators out there. And then they also do have built in like a user base and a familiarity with the name BackerKit, because all of the big Kickstarter creators, like, Kickstarter is not set up to support really big, really complicated campaigns. It's just not. BackerKit is almost a necessity for those big campaigns. And so they actually have a big database of customers, and they're able to take advantage of that. So I've actually been a little bit surprised at how slow BackerKit's growth for their new crowdfunding platform has been, given the advantage that they have over some of the other platforms like Crowdfunder, of such a big built-in audience.
You think with more of the consumer, like, as a creator, you're very familiar with BackerKit. As a purchaser, you're familiar in the instance of I've gone in there and I've put in my information, they have my information, but the actual consumer doesn't engage that much with BackerKit, and that's the buyer, right? And so although they have this amazing like portfolio of creators, I'm not sure they've engaged with the actual buyer as much as like Kickstarter. Like everyone's familiar purchasing on Kickstarter. I don't know if that has more to do with it, and that's why they've been a little bit slower. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of reasons, but also like even BackerKit. A lot of times, like people still, and this is a consumer thing where once the consumer has locked in what you are, it is hard for them to change. Like it's often hard to change their perception. So when most creators hear BackerKit, they are thinking this pledge manager that is used by the really big Kickstarter campaigns. Like that's what they think the company is, that like they BackerKit equals this product. And most Kickstarter campaigns actually don't sort of hit the threshold where strapping on this extra tool that takes, hours to set up and then is an extra layer of things, like doesn't make sense actually for the majority of project creators that launch on Kickstarter. So a lot of creators like and all that, but right now BackerKit is actually like, it's a crowdfunding support company that has tools that I think every creator should use, like their BackerKit launch tool. Every creator should use it just to get some cool analytics. And then most creators that have launched at least three, like probably I'd say 3 or more Kickstarter projects in the past, you definitely want to use BackerKit Launch because it will send a very targeted email to all of your past backers that have yet to back your new project. And that's the absolute best people to put a message in front of. And they give you another way to do that. So that's a tool that they have. They also have a marketing platform where they will run ads on your behalf. And now they have the crowdfunding as well. So I think there is always some growing pains when you go from, well, we were just this one thing that we did very well, to a suite of services for crowdfunders. And so there's that. I also like, part of it also, like at least in the comic space, is choices. It was I think only in the last month or two that BackerKit even put a comics category on their page. They were really focusing in on pins and tabletop games, and so no surprise that there were only like a handful of comic projects that I've ever launched on BackerKit. But Kickstarter over the past couple of years, and in 2023, I think more than any year since I've been doing the podcast, has Kickstarter been making changes and upgrading their own platform and adding features that creators have been asking for forever. And so I do think a big part of that is them recognizing, oh, we can't just sit on our laurels here, even though our laurels say that we have the biggest database of customers with credit cards on file so that we have one-click purchase ability. And that is so huge, like reducing the friction to a pledge or a sale is absolutely huge. Such that, like, when Crowdfunder first launched and I read their PowerPoint deck of like what they offered, it was funny to me because I'm like, oh, this is a crowdfunding platform that literally just is launching, and their value proposition is, the top 10 things that creators tell me that, as I've been interviewing, doing interviews since 2015, like the top 10 things that creators tell me that, irks them a little bit about Kickstarter. Well, we have a solution for that. And it was almost like that was the value proposition. But the challenge for something like Crowdfunder is, when you've trained your audience to support you over on Kickstarter, and for me at Comix Tribe, like I'm 33 launches deep. Like to like all of a sudden send my people to somewhere else and ask them to set up a new account, to do other like,
Yes.
and then also like all of the stuff that Kickstarter does on its back end to promote projects and cross promote projects and make it and bring back past backers. Like you do lose a lot of that. And so in my Comix Launch Pro program and community, I do have, there's over 300 creators that are, in my private community, and many of them are experimenting with some of these, but I haven't really found too many that are like, yeah, the grass is greener
Yeah.
outside of Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So
what are your thoughts? I've seen a lot of creators, they'll do a Kickstarter, but then they also do an Indiegogo at the same time. And I know from like Indiegogo kind of becomes their everyday storefront where you could always purchase their comics through, whereas Kickstarter has a certain time frame. What are your thoughts about someone trying to juggle both of those? Is there a certain point where it makes sense, or it's really good just to stick with one?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not a fan of trying to run simultaneous crowdfunding launches on different platforms. Part of the reason for that is because these platforms don't really operate on linear basis, right? The more funds you make, the easier it is to make more funds. And so if you are splitting your own audience and promoting two launches and taking your messaging and splitting it up between, hey, go get it on Kickstarter or go get it over here.
Yeah.
For your own audience, you're diluting them. You're basically diluting both launches so that your product on both pages is going to rank lower than either one would rank if you had just focused all your effort there, which means that you're going to get less eyeballs on it and attract less people that would discover you because of, for your performance. And so I'm not a huge fan of like ever diluting those launches. Now, I do know a lot of creators that their plan is they launch usually on Kickstarter, and then they'll use Indiegogo in demand for their post-launch, and do pick up, routinely a 10 to 20% more over there. Sometimes a lot more based on the platform or the project. I mean, I think one of the advantages of the Kickstarter platform is that ticking clock that once it ends, it ends. Yeah. And you're in or you're out. Indiegogo, I've found, like, from a search functionality standpoint, like, if everything can be alive at all times, then it just becomes like a big gluttonous store. And so the opportunities actually to get your stuff seen by people, by traffic that you're not driving, goes down pretty significantly.
Yeah.
So, now that said, though, there should be a way for people that missed the Kickstarter to still access some of the products that you make or some of the products that you offer. And so whether it's Indiegogo in demand, or you're using a BackerKit pre-order store, or sending people to your own website or Shopify page, that is definitely something that we teach and encourage people to do. But but when you're in the midst of the launch, I think focus is your friend, and focus, drive all roads should lead to that one spot where you want to amplify what you're able to do, because the bigger bonfire you make, the more people are going to come over to sit near it.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. There's been a lot of talk on X about where comic books are at today, right? And in the big two, people are saying there's this big decline in readership, not collectability, but readership. What I haven't heard a lot of talk about is the impact of crowdfunding. And a lot of these amazing writers, I mean, Jeff Johns is a great example. Scott Snyder, right? You have these amazing writers that have gone off to kind of do their own creations. And I think that's kind of hurt the big two until they find talent to replace that, which takes time, right? Yeah. But I think one of the things that a lot of people don't talk about is how big crowdfunding has gotten. And I just feel like there's like this other level of competition to not even just the big two, just in general, the big three, you could call them. I don't know if you kind of have that same feeling. Like when you look at the numbers of how the big two are doing, I'm not sure they're taking in consideration. There's so many new opportunities to pick up so many new genres of comic books through crowdfunding. I don't know if you're feeling the same way. And do we know what % of all comic book sales is coming from Kickstarter or crowdfunding in general?
So ever since the pandemic, like the ability to get like those direct comic numbers have been seriously like hampered, you know? And so like on a month-to-month basis, like nobody can really tell you exactly what anything is selling other than the publishers themselves, and a lot of them keep those numbers to their vest or their chest.
Yeah.
You know, even the biggest comic book Kickstarters, like still in terms of raw numbers or total number of customers, it's still relatively small compared to like the order run sizes of some of the biggest books. But again, that only tells you what actually a relatively small number of retailers are ordering for books, and you know the inflation of those numbers and everything. Like it's very hard to, you know, say in absolute terms. But comics crowdfunding has continued to rise pretty you know, pretty steadily over the past I mean, since I've been doing it, since I've been paying attention, since I've been launching. And I think well over it's like well over $30 million just on the Kickstarter platform alone. And so, you know, if you factor in all crowdfunding, it's probably, you know, closer to $50 million a year is being raised on those platforms. So that's a decent chunk. But it is still, you know, we are still at a place, I think, where 95% of the, you know, comic reading public is not backing Kickstarter projects regularly. So there's still, I think, in this regard, room for it to grow. And so but this year especially, I think we've seen just the volume of projects go up significantly. You know, traditionally December is like the slow month for crowdfunding projects. A lot of people, you know, afraid to launch because they don't want to compete with your Black Friday sales and your Christmas holiday shopping season and everything. But there were still, you know, last time I checked, there's still close to 200 comic projects live on Kickstarter, which is as many as I've seen in the month of December since I've been paying attention to it. So yeah, the volume is definitely going up. There are more creators that launch on a monthly or even multiple projects a month basis than there ever have been. And, you know, you go outside the big two, Marvel and DC, boom, IDW, Dark Horse, like a lot of these publishers are now, hey, you know, for our specialty projects, for the big honking things like the deluxe omnibuses, like it only makes sense to, you know, incorporate a crowdfunding model where you can sell deluxe super premium editions to direct to consumers and get 90% in advance and take home 90% of what they're investing, so that we can actually pay for these big, expensive, the direct market probably wouldn't be able to support type projects. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of that going forward as well.
And the other thing that I've noticed is retailers, again, I think they look at Kickstarter as a negative, and it's competing against how they already run their business, which is through Lunar or through Diamond. And so we don't see a ton of support from comic book retailers for projects that are on Kickstarter. Which, you know, obviously someone who creates comics, we would love to see more of that. I'm not sure if that bridge will ever be built. What are your thoughts on that? Are you seeing more comic book retailers look to Kickstarter just to diversify their like portfolio of comic books within their store, or do you think that that might not happen?
Yeah. I mean, I totally understand from a retailer's perspective why supporting Kickstarters, supporting multiple Kickstarters
Mm-hmm.
every month is not uh it's not a smart business move, right? Like most of them are operating on, 30-day, 30 to 45-day pay cycles, and
Sure.
and they're, shelling out a lot of money each month and need to have that money bring in a quick return. And so if my prospect is between, ordering from Lunar or Diamond, getting product and then paying for it 30 days later after I've had the opportunity to sell a chunk of it,
Sure.
versus Kickstarter, where I'm paying up front, might get it anywhere from 1 month to 2 years later, paying for, usually full boat for shipping,
Yeah.
and getting maybe a 50% off discount, but maybe also not.
Yeah.
I totally understand why retailers are not, super thrilled to support Kickstarters. And I'm actually pleasantly surprised that so many do. Now, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them might support projects from creators that they've had in their store, or creators that they believe in, much like, uh, in addition to, hey, I'm buying this, a Kickstarter pledge is a little bit different, because often a Kickstarter pledge might just be saying, hey, I
Mm-hmm.
want this thing to exist, or
Right.
I want this creator to succeed,
Mm-hmm.
whether they ever read the book or do anything with it when you send them, something. So that there are other reasons why people support crowdfunding above and beyond just that sale.
Yeah.
Uh, and we've had a lot of success at Comix Tribe, like offering retailer tiers, and
Mm-hmm.
they're never like, massively supported, but we've had some campaigns where we get between, 5 and 10 retailers that come in a retailer tier. We usually try to, offer a competitive discount on buying in bulk, and we usually try to offer some incentives, or some things that they might want to take advantage of.
Yeah.
Um, and like store, like co-branded, store, like exclusive mini prints, or sometimes, little cameos or shout outs in the books, etc. And so we've had some success offering it, but it is not like the main focus, nor should I think it be creators' main focus. Like if you're going into a Kickstarter campaign and you're like, got to get retailers on board, it's just not, it's probably, swimming upstream anyway.
Sure.
If you're,
Yeah.
unless you have one of those rare comic book retailers who's just sitting on a pile of gold and looking for ways to spend it. But I have not found that is
Yeah.
that's very common.
Yeah, I've met a lot of creators over this last year, and there's a lot of people that are experts at crowdfunding, and when you work with them, from what I've heard is, you get this list of retailers. They're called Kickstarter friendly or crowdfunder friendly. And I get so many messages back going, dude, I sent emails or tried to call like 150 retailers, and not one of them was interested. In fact, a lot of them said we don't buy things through Kickstarter. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know how that's like a selling point of how I'm going to support your Kickstarter is I'm going to give you a list of 150 retailers. And that's why I asked. I don't think it has been successful up to this point. In fact, I've never met someone who has gotten that list and like, dude, half of them bought my comic book. So I thought it was kind of funny when I heard that, and that's why I wanted to ask you if you've heard the same thing or seen those lists that are,
Yeah, I mean, most, when I look back at the list of retailers, a lot of them that end up supporting our Kickstarter books end up being like online, primarily retailers and resellers, or they're retailers that I've made a personal connection with at some
yeah,
point over the years, and that they're supporting the team and the creators and the imprint as much as the project themselves. So yeah, cold calling retailers, especially on on a Tuesday
Yeah.
or a
Thursday.
Wednesday is
Yeah.
usually not, not terribly successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tyler, how can people reach you and get your content?
Yeah, so I mean, usually the easiest thing is if you're listening to this, I'm assuming you know what a podcast is.
Yeah.
So if you just search in your favorite comics or your favorite podcast app, Comix Launch, Comix Launch, I will pop up and then I can jump in your earbuds every Sunday. We release weekly shows. And our shows on the Comix Launch podcast are a mix of sort of one-on-one topic focused training shows where I'll share something, a new strategy that I'm working on, or something that one of my Comix Launch Pro members like did and had tremendous success with. So that's some of the shows. We also I do interview shows with creators, usually creators when they have a live Kickstarter project, but we don't tend to have most of the talk be about their project because I know my audience is comic book creators and crowdfunders. And so I always ask every creator, and this will go out to any creators that might be listening to this that are looking to get on some podcasts, because that's always a good thing to do during a launch.
Sure.
I always ask creators like, okay, great, you have a project, awesome, but what's a topic? What's an area of your expertise? What's a challenge or something that you want to bring up and discuss that's going to appeal to the creators out there so that we make it valuable for their time tuning in? Nobody wants to just hear a pitch, but I have found that like when people hear some really good advice and they also hear a little bit about the book that the person is working on, chances that they actually want to go support that project go through the roof versus just, hey, here's how awesome my, Stickman book is. So that's the podcast is definitely a great place to just get more from me. We also just I'm trying to test a few do a few new things just in terms of outreach, and so we're starting to publish some content over on Substack for Comix Tribe related stuff. So to keep track of the kinds of books that we're putting out, just released a new the Comix Tribe Dispatch is our little newsletter that's going to go out on Substack. So if you're on Substack or looking for some newsletter content, you go to comixtribe.com/Substack. Oh, actually, I totally butchered that. It's just comixtribe.substack.com yet. I haven't made a specialty link, but now I probably will go and do that. And so you can get download 5 free first issues of Comix Tribe books. So if you've never heard of Comix Tribe or want to check out some of our titles, we'll send you 5 of them. And then the last thing I'll say is if you are somebody that is sort of new to the Kickstarter game, don't worry, you haven't missed the boat. The best is yet to come. The platform is in so much better shape now than it was when, I'm sure when we first started. Comic projects especially, are succeeding at a higher level than they ever have before. But if you still feel like you need a little support around that, I put together a free 1-hour class. People can get that at comixlaunch.com/class, and that'll take you through the 4 main steps that I've found that lead to a successful Kickstarter launch. And then at the end of that training, there's some information about the Comix Launch Pro program and community that I run. That's my chance to sort of help creators take things to the next level.
That's awesome, man. Well, Tyler, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you making time for me this morning, man. It's awesome to finally meet you. Like I said, I've been digesting your content probably since maybe April is when you somehow popped up on my Instagram. I'm like, oh, this guy's pretty interesting. So I've been watching ever since. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise. Congratulations on all your success. And we'll make sure we put all the links below. That way, anybody that wants to reach out to Tyler or to consume the content that they're putting out is amazing. I think I'd like to close on one more thing. And you made a comment the other day of, I might butcher this, you might have to step in, but how many creators getting into Kickstarter with their own project have never backed anybody on Kickstarter or crowdfunding. Can you just kind of leave us with your thoughts on that and how important it is that you're supporting the indie community like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was on a success strategy call the other day. I do these a few times a month, where I just, give some free time to creators and chat for about 30 minutes. And one of the creators that I was talking to, was telling me what he wanted to do and how he was hoping to use crowdfunding. And one of the questions that I asked, and I knew the answer because I looked at his like preview page, but I asked him how many Kickstarter projects has he backed, and he's like, "Well, I've never backed any." And like, so you never had the experience of a backer, right? And the comics Kickstarter community is awesome. So I encourage you to be a part of it. And one of the ways that you can be a part of it is by backing other projects on Kickstarter, and know that Kickstarter shows whether or not you've backed other projects. It makes that information available.
Yeah.
And it sends like a subtle message.
Yeah.
If that backer count of 0, I mean, that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that there is this massive reservoir of trust that a backer is extending to you when they pledge to your project. They are giving you their hard-earned money that they already worked for something that you are then committing to deliver down the line, but that they know in most cases doesn't even exist yet, at least in the finished form. And so there's a lot of trust there. So any and everything that you can do on your Kickstarter page, and I've got a whole page design blueprint. We've talked, there's podcast episodes about it, and we have a whole module in our program about it. But your goal for your Kickstarter page is it needs to ooze trustworthiness.
Yeah.
And if you have a big fat 0 for projects backed, I would want, does this person even know how Kickstarter works? Right? Like, or are they just here because they heard you could make some money on Kickstarter? That's kind of the message that it sends out. And then it also sends that same message to peers, and your creator peers. Getting support from other creators is one of the best things that you can do for your Kickstarter, because Kickstarter has this great thing where when a creator backs another creator, it will notify all of the followers of that creator's followers what they back. Yeah. And so I've had situations where I'll have Kickstarters live and I'll see a flood of backing come in. I'm like, where did that come from? It's like, oh, well, this big name Kickstarter creator backed this project, and then all of a sudden, here comes some of their followers that have just suddenly discovered my project. But that's not going to happen if you're not also just being a part of that community, giving back. The old golden rule: do unto others what you would have done unto you. It works on Kickstarter. So, but the nice thing is like, they don't show how much total money you've backed. So even if all you can do is token $1 support, go back a bunch of projects. And the other thing that you'll get from that is you'll get access to their project updates. And if you've never done a Kickstarter before, backing really great, successful Kickstarter projects and then getting access to their updates to see what they're doing during a launch in order to maintain enthusiasm and keep the funding coming in, like, that's an education that is worth far more than whatever you're pledging for it. And you'll often find, and I've got a nice stack next to my bed right now, like, there's some really great comics on the Kickstarter platform. Like, I'm just catching up on my buddy Colin Devonshire. He's somebody in my course, but he's got this great series By the Time I Get to Dallas, and I'm getting caught up on that, and some anthology projects and so much. So yeah, be a part of the community. It will come back to you and pay dividends in the end.
That's awesome, Tyler. Well, Tyler, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on today. I hope we could do this again sometime. Again, everyone, get out there, follow Tyler on all these different links that I'm going to throw on there. Comix Launch. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on, and I hope you have a really good Christmas. You got a young one, so it's going to be a lot of fun, man.
It should be. It should be. Same to you, Tommy. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you. Have a good one.
Bye now.
Bye.